Why didn't it go live? Oh, it did go live. All right. Ah, StreamYard. Usually it's
First,
like it spins and it says go live, and then this time it just like was like didn't do anything. Today
that's what
is
happens.
well,
Just happened a day
um,
today.
yeah, and then now it doesn't want to post to LinkedIn, but I had problems last time too, so I'm not even gonna bother with it. Because today is just gonna be one of those days, right? So hello everybody. Thank you for being here. Welcome to our latest episode of Dev Relish, where we talk about all things developer relations and developer relations adjacent jobs. That's the ish part of Dev Relish. So I'm Brian Rinaldi. I'm no longer Erin's colleague as of yesterday. I'm now I lead developer relations at Local Stack, and you can introduce yourself, Erin.
Hi, I'm Erin. I'm a developer experience engineer at LaunchDarkly and also Brian's former colleague.
Yes, former colleague. So now that's the reason I left. Couldn't take
You've
being
already had enough and too much of me between Dev Relish and random rants on the internet. Too much. It's like too much. But I
It's not
did
true.
see some of the Local Stack people and like waved last week. When they were
Oh,
all
right
over
there, because they were at
Zoom.
the Red
And
Point. Yeah,
mhm.
yeah. So now you know them. Yeah. So all right.
Between that and
So
being very
I
awkward there.
I will yeah. So I will to share like why I was all flustered and stuff. I mean, I managed to screw up a lot of things today. I sent out the email reminder for this particular thing with the wrong time, and I sent it out at the wrong time. So it said like in 30 minutes, and it had the wrong time. It said that it was at 1. It's actually at 3, obviously, and it said in 30 minutes, and I sent it at 10:30 in the morning. So anyway, my brain was actually not functioning yet, I suppose. So I'll just kind of say that. All right. So real quick, I also want to thank our sponsor for DevRelish, Data Protocol. So Data Protocol is a whole platform that to kind of like create education for your communities. It's all interactive. There's even a console and things where you can interact with the tool, kind of interact with the program as it's going along. So you can create a whole like video library. They kind of say like it's like Netflix for your community. So it's really interesting, kind of cool platform if you're trying to kind of get some education out there for your community. So check them out at dataprotocol.com. Thank you, Data Protocol, for sponsoring. And now we will bring up our special guest today, Raymond Camden. He's most known for his cat advocacy. So this is an entire episode about cats. Really, that's all we're going to talk about. Let's talk cats, Ray.
I'm also a former colleague of you as well.
This is true. I have a lot of
This is
former
like
colleagues apparently.
time out. We could just talk. We could have an exes chat. I'm here for this. This is like all the tea. Let's get a few more.
Yeah, you
How better our lives are now that Brian has removed himself.
What has been the last 2 days at work like now that I don't have to deal with Brian?
So much easier, I know. So Ray and I did work together many years ago. So to kind of like give my little introduction to Ray and I have known each other for, I kind of tried to remember this morning. I think it's like 20 years, Ray.
Yeah.
Which
it sounds about right. Scary, but that sounds about right.
Yeah. We're that old. So Ray and I met because we were both in the cold fusion community many, many years ago. For those of you who don't know what cold fusion is, don't worry about it. So it was a programming language. It is a programming language Adobe still makes it. We were both in the cold fusion community. I think Ray, we first met officially when you reviewed an article of mine for the Cold Fusion Developers Journal. And just to give you a sense of how long ago this was, that was in print.
Yeah.
It was in print. They printed journals back then. Yes. Can you imagine? Anyway. Yeah. So nowadays, Ray and I, we did work together for some time at Adobe and have been friends Well, even I think we were friends even before you joined Adobe. So
Oh yeah, absolutely. So we were in that community, that
yeah,
tight knit
and
Cold Fusion community, which is still very tight knit and very friendly still. So
I know. I'm just, I haven't been involved in it for a long time, so I can, you know, but Todd's here, and he's really into cold fusion. That's all he talks about. Todd Sharp is all about the cold fusion. Your other former colleague, Rachel Luxembourg, is here. I think all the former colleagues are going to be here. We're just going to talk
it's
about
an Adobe Macromedia reunion type thing.
reunion.
So the weirdest, the only small world connection. I've not worked in cold fusion. I was working in media was my first job. So thank you for keeping me employed by putting things in print, because that was my first job out of college. Great.
Yeah.
Love to see another journalism background here. But Brian, I think we went back and did realize that I was at the Adobe Max conference in Vegas the same year you were. I think it was
Yes,
Vegas
that's
or
right.
something.
We did talk about them.
We did discover that we were at the same conference, but I was in an entirely different. I was working at an agency at a time, like trying to be full in UX, which is very not where I ended up. But
yeah,
very small. So we might have been at the same conference, Ray. We just didn't realize it.
Absolutely.
So, okay, with all that being said, Ray's also been in DevRel for a really, really long time. So kind of give us a little bit of your background. We usually kind of start with like how you got into DevRel, what made you kind of take that career path, where did you start, and how did you end up in DevRel, and kind of walk us through your career path in DevRel.
My background story and all that, starting from when my spaceship crashed in a farm and my parents discovered me. I will go way back, so I think it impacts what I am doing today. I, at a very young age, was influenced by a certain movie, and wasn't Star Wars. It was Tron, which came out in '84, I think, and I would have been like 10 or 11 when it came out, and uh, hopefully mature enough to realize, oh, this is a movie. I'm not so young to think that was real, but it absolutely like got me into like, oh, I want to do computers. So it's going to be as easy and as cool as that. I'll never have any trouble. So I was lucky that my mom's employer had given her an Apple IIc, 2E. This was back when having a computer at home was kind of rare, but getting more common. And they wanted her to get more familiar with it. And for some reason, they gave her a bunch of games. So I kind of took it from her and played the games, and at a certain point began to want to cheat at the games by editing them. I wanted to learn basic. That's when, back then you bought a computer that actually gave you like a manual for writing code for it, which would be shocking if you got that from Dell or Apple even nowadays. But started coding at a very early age. Went to college for computer science. I was determined I was going to be a games developer, or I was going to work for the CIA, because I'd also seen war games, and I thought, yeah, I'm either doing like Star Trek CGI, or I'm going to be doing war game type stuff. And discovered that good at math is like being good on your high school baseball team and trying to play for the major leagues. The math just killed me. Like I dead stop Calc 3. That was it. So I switched to English, which I enjoyed anyway. Was in a technical writing program, and I don't know why I thought writing instruction manuals would be good, but in my mind, it was still computers, it was still technical, and it was using writing skills. And at that time, the web came out, and it was very easy back then. I got into it, and my web career kind of took off from there. And very early on, I just discovered that I liked sharing what I was building, because I like to kind of build dumb things for fun, and I enjoyed sharing that. And I did maybe 10 plus years of evangelist type stuff without having the official role. And my company supported it. I was pretty lucky. Like they knew I was an active writer, an active blogger, active speaker. So all my jobs were pretty supportive in terms of sending me out to conferences and stuff. And It was Adobe actually that got me my first real DevRel job in 2013. And I feel like I talked for a very long time, so now y'all talk.
Yeah, I think 2013 was, I think that was when because I was already kind of in a different role, I think, at Adobe when you joined, and we were on Ben's team together. Yeah.
Yeah, back in the day. Yeah, that was during the big HTML5 push when
Hmm.
Adobe was like, "I'm gonna pretend you don't know about Flash, and we're gonna make HTML5 tools instead." And they made some really darn good tools back then. I think
They
only one of them
did.
survived. Yeah, that whole Edge
Yeah.
No,
transition is great.
I'm just gonna keep my mouth shut because
Yeah. Aaron's like, I don't even know what you guys are talking about.
I'm like thinking 2013. I'm like, I was a poli-sci major in undergrad.
Yep. Yeah, we're gonna talk old people stuff today, Aaron. I'm sorry you're gonna get left out. So,
It's all good.
um,
I mean, I do remember a lot of the thing that's interesting is like hearing y'all talk about it is I do remember this is before I had just as my that would have been my second year of undergrad. I'd been finishing that up, but it'd been like moving into that's when I was like, I'm never gonna work in politics ever. And then whoops, did that, ended up working politics anyway. And had moved into journalism a lot because of the web fascinations. And I was like, this is super cool. I do remember having an Adobe rep at our school that we got like the free Adobe everything. And I remember that was also, that was building, I did have a build your own like WordPress site class as part of our journalism degree. It was very basic, like WordPress building, which I had sped run through because I hated it. And I hated doing like the step-by-step tutorials of the class. And I like also have learned to not like WordPress either. So it was like a double hate. And I was like, I'm just going to bang this class out and not pay attention. So whoopsie.
So Ray, you started Adobe, and then
Yeah.
you moved on to like some other companies. I won't go through a whole Ray, but now you're back at Adobe. You kind of made the full circle back to Adobe. Tell us a little bit about what your role is right now.
So initially, it was just for what they were calling PDF services, and now it's Acrobat services because marketing. Um, Set of APIs related to working with PDFs, and it's one of those things that it's really, really boring, but like super practical. And I'm the older I get, the more I appreciate boring and practical. uh, but I had reached out to Alicia, who you knew as well, because she was on that team. And I was like, what is this team? I'm like, oh, we have these APIs. I'm like, I've never heard of it. You need a developer advocate. And she said, we're hiring for that. So that got me back in the Adobe machine. And since then, I have kind of expanded to more APIs. Like we have Firefly API. So if you need to make an image with a cat, I can show you how to do that.
Yes. So for I think you can explain your cat advocate, because I mean, folks here don't. It looks like a bunch of them already do know you, but for anybody who doesn't know you, what is the deal with the cat advocacy?
I just like using cats for demos. I
Yeah.
I've bumped into a few people at work in terms of my demos not always being the most serious, but like I'm a big believer in like if you have a little bit of fun in a demo, it may not be business practical, but like you can catch someone's interest. And any decent reader is going to say, okay, Ray did this dumb demo of generating cat pictures. My real use case is product pictures. But, Ray showed me how easy the API is. I could take out his BS and put in serious business time type examples and go from there. It's just fun, and I never have to think of a topic in terms of me trying something. Oh, I'm going to try out this particular Gen AI. I'm going to involve cats with it. I we had 5, and then our housekeeper, her outside cat had kittens. So now we have 6, and we're gonna stop at 6. When
Ah,
6 is the limit.
that's what any cat person says. This is like they're always like, I
That's
promise I can stop at any time.
and time.
And I have
You know,
one
where
dog.
I'm disappointed that like when I was like looking up like stuff like I'm like I did not see a cat picture on like I need to see where's the cat pictures, where's the cat picture blog, where's the cat picture examples, and you see all 6 of
So
them names
usually
for
the
treats.
cat even shows up on at some point or another. The cat will come across the screen.
I closed my door because the new kitten
Oh,
is a little bit like she was pulling my power cords like a couple days ago, and I was like, "No, you can't do that."
so but I do think like from a getting back to the DevRel topic specifically, like I think you make a good point about creating how I think the hardest part to me isn't just like what do like how do I build something for a particular demo? It's like what can I build that's both interesting, gets the learning across, but also like is fun. Which I mean, we're not like all the stuff we're not all Todd who gets to talk about video streaming. That's kind of cool. Like some of us have to talk about PDFs or feature flags, which they're not. I'm not criticizing, but they're not as fun to talk about. So like, how do you take a dry topic and make it interesting so that somebody wants to learn? I mean, so I think the cats is one way, but it's always one of the challenges I think you deal with as a DevRel. It's like, how do I make this both educational and interesting?
I am a big believer in just hooking the person in the room for knowing what's possible. So they don't have to learn the API. Like if they're with you for 15 minutes and they see you show stuff, I'm not thinking they're going to memorize what they're saying. Instead, I want them to be inspired. Like, oh, that code was pretty easy. And like I could do that myself, and I could build something like what they're showing.
Yeah, definitely. Um, Sorry, you were gonna say something, Erin. You're muted.
Yeah, my internet has been a little slow today. Sorry, y'all. And you're hopefully you're not hearing my dog snorting and sneezing right beneath me. Don't have a cat, but I have a 50-pound dog that is right on my toes, snorting and sneezing today. But when it comes to like AI, like I think there's a lot more fun stuff. Like I've seen a lot of really fun examples out there with making things fun that aren't fun. Like I just finished a demo. LL Brian finally finished that Python demo. They kept bugging me to make it launch darkly. And it's a AI demo. But it's very like the Prince, like, yes, it teaches feature flags, but like it's also a Python thing. And I think of Rob DeWitt, who I don't know if he's in today, but he's another developer advocate in the data space that has done one of the best tutorials on using data and showing how data models work with generative AI to make Pokemon. But I'm curious, like, how do you approach like the reality, like the fun and the practicality? Because there's obviously it's fun, but we all don't get to create our own Pokemon in our day to day. Or
It's
right,
funny.
like I do.
It's funny you mentioned Gen AI because when I first started looking into it, I had the opposite reaction because I felt like every example I had seen already was silly. Sometimes intentionally, sometimes not. And so I struggled at first. I actually wanted to be more serious because I wanted to see, can I find like a real use case for this? I started playing with Gemini about 8 months or so ago, only, and shout out to all the companies out there, only because they had a free tier. I avoided Chat GPT because I didn't want to pay $20 for me to test their product and blog about it. So I went to Gemini because it was free. But like my initial thinking there was more create something that actually shows kind of at least a real world use case. I did do a cat demo early on, but it showed, web application, take a picture, identify the cat in there. And I felt like that was something that could be practical.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's ways to kind of take even the most abstract kind of ideas, have fun with it, but also make like relate it to something real. Like I mean, one example that comes to mind was I got this idea when I was at Launch Darkly to like, oh, I'm gonna use feature flags to so we had this at the video of our kind of mascot called Toggle, and he was DJing. And I was like, oh, you know what? But I mean, turning on like it's like a mixer, right? Like if I'm turning on or off a flag, it's like a mixer. So like, can I use feature flags to create like a DJ mixing board, basically, to like create your and so I built that, and it was a lot of fun, but also, like, I mean, the article wasn't obviously about how do you build a DJ board, like, with a, because that's just not relevant, but it was about kind of illustrating a concept of like how the immediacy of the feature flags, and the latency between when I flip it and when you see the actual response in the application, and so on and so forth. So like, I think you can even take some of these kind of, I think that's the fun, the creative side of DevRel to me, is like taking your kind of wacky idea but making it relevant to companies to illustrate a concept, that otherwise might be like, I could write some dry, boring thing where, it's just like, oh, I flipped this flag and you see now it says true, and now I flip it back and now it says false. It's like, but that's just not fun to watch. It's not interesting to read about. It's like, and so you're just not gonna kind of get an audience to buy into reading a full article, I think, if your demo is incredibly boring, and it is challenging. So like, I think there's two ways. There's my demo is incredibly like detailed in terms of like actually showing you the ins and out of a real world application, or my demo is just fun. Like, but to me, like the in between is kind of doesn't work in terms of kind of engaging content.
There's a couple things I want to say about that. I think there's a lot of products that I've not used because the onboarding is so hard. And like, once you get past that, maybe a great product. But if it's a real hassle to get started, then I'm going to avoid it. Like, I've rarely used Amazon Lambda, even though like that's the archetype, that is serverless, right? So many products were on top of that. I have used plenty of products on top of Lambda just because it was a lot easier for me to get started and get my URLs and all that. So one of the things I look for, like when I read blog posts or attend this, and Brian, I attended a session where you were showing that. Like, one of the things I'm looking out for, maybe not, I don't really care how practical the example is, like how quickly were you able to get started? Like, what were the steps before you could build maybe an impractical demo? But if it was quick to get there, I know it's going to be quick to go to something that's a bit more practical.
Yeah, no, that's true. But I also think like that's something, obviously you can't impact AWS Lambda, but like it is something you can do, like with the PDF services. Like that is something that's part of your role. I'm assume at Adobe, is be like, hey, listen, I struggle. You're the DevRel, you're the first user of many of the new things,
Yeah.
right? Like, so you can tell them, hey, I struggled with this new feature, like getting started with it, and so like, bring that feedback back to the product, and hopefully improve that developer experience.
Yeah.
But
I'm also,
sorry. I was going to say, there's also like a double-edged sword with that, because many times, like, I came into LaunchDarkly having used LaunchDarkly before, having been a customer at 2 different companies, and that meant that I was suffering from the recency bias. Like, I knew it, there was a curse of knowledge. There is something to be said for, knowing where to look or who to ask does kind of blind you a little bit.
That's true. I think, I'm not saying I'm an expert, like I'm the best at this, but I personally, I often, when I'm trying these things, like even when I'm doing something that I know really well with the product, like I try to kind of take the mindset of somebody who doesn't know, and pick apart like some of the questions that, like some of the things that I'm like, well, I know what this means, for instance, but like if you're coming in, would you know what that means? I don't, and I can be really annoying about it, and like and they're like, oh my God, people to come in, like, come on. But I think it's one of those things. We make a lot of assumptions about prerequisite knowledge, both in how we design products, but also how we write about those products, that like can be problematic, right?
You saw me on LinkedIn this week, or maybe last week, time is weird, praising, like, well, actually a former coworker of yours as well, Holly Shinsky, had written up a terminology guide for Firefly, because there's so many terms in there that as a developer, like in painting and out painting. I had no clue what that is. And so she basically just wrote a document explaining that. And it's like, perfect. Oh, you're a developer. You don't know all this artsy crap. Here it is. This will help you read our API docs a bit better as well.
That's true too, because I mean, you're also talking like even PDFs and things like that. Like often you're talking about things that developers don't necessarily like. I might be able to get programmatically do this stuff, but I'm not an artist. So like if I'm using image services and I'm not an artist, I don't necessarily know the terminology. That's good. Yeah.
We
And Holly's great.
yeah, we will commonly run into issues where something won't work with our API. And I have a coworker who is a PDF expert. He's read the spec and he knows everything about it. And can say, oh yeah, it failed for a good reason because it was some weird bad PDF producer. And like my argument back is that, well, no one else, no one knows this. No one, like you're the only person in the world who knows why this failed. We need to go back to engineering maybe and see if we can float a better error, say something like this PDF was produced poorly, just give the developer some kind of clue as to what's going on.
Yeah. For sure. It's even when this is stuff we did at with Launch Darkly, even like sometimes just didn't understand like why a flag failed or things like that. So like getting that kind of information back is really, really helpful. And Philip says he loved Firefly. I actually makes me think I loved fireworks. Can you do anything about this, Ray? Can you bring back fireworks, please?
No, I never used it. I never
You
used
never used it?
Photoshop. I never used, yeah,
What?
I'm horrible.
What do you use then?
Paint.
Just don't paint.
Microsoft Paint.
For real, you use Paint?
99% of my design stuff is resizing an image. So I use paint.net, that open source project. I just open it, resize it, save it, done.
I'm trying to think.
Okay.
Wait,
Well,
Sketch wasn't Adobe. Sketch is Sketch still around?
Is what's the line?
Sketch?
Sketch?
I don't know.
That
I
was a
don't know
product,
Sketch.
wasn't it?
That was a product. Was that an Adobe product? I can't remember.
Don't know.
No, I don't think it was because they have a separate. But that was like, wow, they have changed their look a lot on their site. Sketch was like, that was my first. I remember people being, yeah, that was my first one.
Yeah, Eric says Sketch is Bohemian something. Like I guess that's the name of the company.
Yeah.
Anyway, Philip says he still use fireworks today. I guess you could, right? Like this was pre Creative Cloud kind of thing. So you actually owned the license indefinitely. But I would imagine that the different specs for like the different image formats are a bit outdated at this point.
I would imagine like WebP support would not be there.
No, it's yeah. Anyway, so Erin, fireworks probably predates you too. I don't know when they got rid of fireworks.
It says 2005. It says acquired in 2005, but I remember then the big thing was when Adobe switched the cloud with the Creative Cloud. Like that was earlier. Like that was early on. That was like a big thing. No one tell anybody I'm still on my student account from NYU.
Hold on one second.
Reported. Yeah, Ray can't say anything because then he'd have to have them watch this where he's like, "Oh, I don't use Photoshop. I use this open source image editor." This is a fireable offense at Adobe, I think.
I was at Adobe, so my first stint was when Creative Cloud came out, and I know Rachel was there as well. And luckily, it went over great, so it was a non-issue. It was a slow news day. Nobody cared. Everybody was super happy with the monthly cost.
To paying monthly.
Yeah, I do remember that was like the big, and that was all during like my undergrad years was like that Creative Cloud, but it was very just, I didn't use it a ton. I remember using Sketch a decent amount for like basic UX classes. And then by the time I was in grad school I was mean, I went to school 2018, 2020 for grad school. So by then it was like Figma was out. Everything, like, we are pretty similar to where we are now we're one out for the folks that tried 10 years to get freehand back. But that was another one. I'm like, oof. I do, like, I was like, Brian does, I mean, I think I've said it on the show before, but like last year was the first year I had something that I was like, man, that was something earlier on in my tech career that no longer is a thing. And that was, they changed the Shopify checkout library. And I was like, what? I remember like stressing about this, and it's now easy. Yes,
like
developer relations can apparently maybe move on from that.
Yeah, that's really all developer relations is about.
Fireworks.
Fireworks. Yeah, so
Dreamweaver's still around.
On that note, though, like, I do think, getting to your whole thing of like moving to Creative Cloud, like, I remember when I was at Adobe, one of the big things was over dealing with the Flash community when I initially got there, and the struggles I had, like, kind of learning to especially at a big company as kind of well known as Adobe, but this has happened at other places where it's like the company does something that like causes some outrage in the community, and having to be the public face of something that suddenly caused all this like uproar, and trying to learn to how to navigate that. It can be difficult. I mean, have either of you kind of dealt with that at all?
I was at Unsplash when they got acquired and did the messaging around the acquisition for Unsplash. So I did that. Also worked at a startup that very publicly imploded on the internet. And so had 2 instances where it was like startup no longer exists and people were using the product. On like both instances, I was like, oof.
Wait, were you still employed by them after each of those things, or was it basically the end?
No, no, it was like, there's not a thing for you here anymore. It was like, finish this up, and then we're giving you a very nice severance to go have a great time and explore other things. Like, I think both times were huge learning experiences for me. Like, I think especially at Unsplash, like I learned a ton there, but I also learned and was able to like, one, I will always have so much, like, I really admire that team for how that works. Like, they are kind of a really cool story of like, you hear those stories of like, oh, the startup didn't take on a ton of extra money and they stayed an 18-person team. And that's really cool. And thinking about how they approached product thinking from that was very cool. But yeah, it's just a very, I got severances and figure out a job.
Yeah. I think in my case, it was more like, how do I, I'm still here working on that product and people are pissed off, and how do I navigate like dealing with the community? In my experience, it was often like what seemed like a major uproar was often a very small group of people who were very loud.
Yeah.
And so I learned to just kind of like, I'd chat with them, but I wouldn't engage too deeply, because it was like they'd be like, you don't understand, this is the death of this and whatever, this everybody's just saying like this is all over, and it turned out like, yeah, they were wrong. I mean, the products died for other reasons, but like not because of the controversies. So but it is hard to navigate that, because especially if you're on social, it's like you're getting bombarded, and it seems like everybody's out there out to get the company, and it's like, but then eventually you just kind of get through it.
One thing that's interesting is, like, actually you reminded me, I worked on when I was a maintainer, and so I was at an open source company and we changed our license, and it was the like not great commercial license, and it was an open source project and an open source tool. And I was prepping because it was right after HashiCorp changed license. So I was like prepping, like bracing, and like my manager was against the change. Other people on my team were against the change naturally, because the people couldn't interface with the people. It was the week after PyData Berlin that we changed it. And I remember going to PyData Berlin and they were like, when are you going to make those updates and update this API that we're going to maintain? And I'm like, oh, oh, I know it's coming. And as much as I thought we were going to get a really big pushback, it was like the way that we did the license change, we left some parts, we made it so it was as flexible as possible. It was only a few bad actors that really were upset. And it was like, wow, that actually kind of cleaned up some of our problems, because not saying that that's the way to go, but like we were getting a couple of like feature requests that were like, this isn't helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like what Rachel says, the concerns just being heard.
Yeah, I agree with that. Making sure you listen, and you're like not, you don't. I would engage with the people, but I would not get drawn into like flame wars about it or anything like that. And I think a lot of DevRels are dealing with this right now, because a lot of companies are moving from like um, an open source, like it's been a constant stream of like, this company just changed their licensing. It was Redis and HashiCorp and who else? I mean, it's been like a nonstop like thing. And I know a lot of people like in DevRel are having to deal with like, okay, we just, we're in the news for negative reasons, and it's not an easy thing to navigate. This doesn't happen in PDF world, Ray?
No, not at all. Closest thing.
No PDF controversies.
Well, a couple days ago, my wife was like on TikTok and like, "Do you heard what Adobe did with their EULA?" I was like, "That's way, 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 way." Our terms of service, we changed something, and people were upset about it. And
I did see that.
I didn't care at all. Like, that's. Soon as you see like emails from like way up high saying, "Don't talk about this," I'm like, "Oh, I wasn't going to talk about it anyway." So,
like this is it gives
Look
me a
out
good
now,
excuse
son.
to get out of it.
only product I was on that was shut down was the really date ourselves, this Macromedia Spectra, which was our $12,000 to $15,000 CMS built on Cold Fusion. And we killed it. We moved it to open source, and I had to do like a meeting at Max with our big customers and say, "Hey, we're doing this and moving to an open source model, so you could still download it and we'll still do some updates, but you can't buy it anymore." But that wasn't too big of a flame fest type thing.
Yes, I do remember that. We can I will not dig deep into Spectra because nobody will know what we're talking about. I have used it. I have nightmares about it.
I have the book right over there. I could bring it out for you.
You wrote one. Did you write that book?
Yeah.
You wrote, yeah. How many books have you written now, Ray?
15 or so, but more than half of those, I was a contributing author, not the only author. Like our last book, you and I, was 50-50. I did the good part, you did the bad part, so it was all covered.
It was about balance. So yeah, and Ray, I put in some of my posts that I'm finally starting to forgive Ray for convincing me to write that book.
I think like, okay, I'm not an author here. But one of the things I think about is like, we've had a lot more like technical books have been, I feel like it's like a rite of passage now for certain people in this career, which is awesome. Love that. But I look at one of the things that my dad had back surgery, and he actually got into learning Python during back surgery. And we actually are going through like the No Starch Press, like what Automate the Simple Stuff book. And I love the No Starch Press books. Like, but outside of like, they have a couple of like really beginner friendly ones. But when you start getting deeper in the weeds, like I have a book that I got at a conference about pandas that I've never opened in my entire life, because that library is changing and there's updates made and it's confusing. And why would I open a book when there's the internet? Like, and how do you think about like that type of education scaling? Because like I'd be concerned publishing a book and then, oh crap, things change in 3 weeks, 3 months, a year.
Have you noticed there's less technical books nowadays?
Yeah, very true. Yeah. Very true. They keep trying to, with that Adobe subscription Creative Cloud and my NYU email that I'm definitely not still claiming to be a student on things anymore. They're definitely trying to push that O'Reilly digital membership. They are pushing that hard on their student community. I mean, that I have heard from other students.
I don't
that
think
are
even
definitely not
O'Reilly
me.
does print books anymore. I think it's all digital, aren't they? I believe they are.
And
I could be
even
wrong.
even if it's PDF only, just a book in general, it's so hard to maintain and update.
Mm.
Unless you have like a much like an 80 page, like I'm a big fan of like the 80-page books, which are real small, and if they go out of date, they were short and sweet anyway. So
Yeah, I agree with that. I would say, never mind the like post publishing. Like the road to getting a book published is so long that between when you like what happened to Ray and I was basically between when we said, okay, this is it. We did all our last updates, and now it's going to go through the whole process to get, to the layout process and I don't remember all the different things. And when it actually got printed and sent out was so long that between those that time, like it's like, I know some of the stuff is outdated already. It hasn't even come out yet. And it's just, I'm like, well, what am I gonna do? I
Like,
mean, can't fix that.
I can still see it being very much useful. Like, again, like the no starch press books, the automate the simple stuff with Python is probably everybody's like, I want to learn how to code. I'm like, please go get that book. That is like, my dad is using it right now, but my dad is using that, and then he will ask questions to Chat GPT and then be like, Erin, Chat GPT gave me this answer. Is that right? And I'm like, did you try it, Dad? And it's very interesting kind of watching, like I see the very project based introductory level that not much is really going to change there in a major library, or major language, but
Ben
more niche.
Forta, Ben Forta and his son released a Python book for beginners, and it was incredible because it was such a day one type thing that it even talked about before you write your first Python program, you need an editor, and you have to write in the editor, and you have to save a file, and you have to figure out where to save that. And we've been doing that for 30 years. It's like nothing
Mhm.
to us, but my kids are very technically proficient on tablets and phones that have no exposed file system. So the idea of
Mhm.
actually making a file and storing it so you could find it again later, I absolutely loved that he covered that in his book. That's the Python book I recommend. I can't remember the
Yeah.
title, so I'm doing a bad
I was
job.
going to say, yeah, I'm going to go dig that up because I think the only thing I think I'm very fortunate is like my dad is a civil engineer by trade, but taught math, his nerdy hobby. He retired and then taught math. Okay. Like what person retires and teaches like Calc 2 at the university level? Whatever, has a great time doing that. But I had learned, because of that, I learned very basic, like how to do math in like a notebook, like a basic file, and write a very, very, very basic mathematical script. But it taught me a little bit of that. But beyond that, it was learning MySpace layouts and learning how to make glitter on my profile. Okay. Like it wasn't, and like being self-taught, that's where some of my gaps totally, my forever crying about JavaScript is do not ask me in certain situation if it's running on the client side or server side, because I'll stare at you and guess, because my brain doesn't get that for whatever reason.
Don't minimize adding sparkle and stuff to your website because life needs more of that.
Life needs more sparkles. Bring back MySpace glitter gifts.
Yeah.
Bring back MySpace glitter gifts.
I will be 5 years married in March of next year, and one thing my wife got me into was this sparkly stuff, which I thought was silly and immature. And the first time I saw a bunch of sparkly stuff, I was like, "Yeah, that makes me happy. Why would I not want more of that in my life?"
Yes, I think.
Yes, more sparkle, more unicorns.
More unicorns. I'm all for unicorns. This kind of like, could be a new theme for you, Ray, in your demos.
Or
Maybe you can even have cats, sparkly cats.
cats on unicorns.
Cats on unicorns with sparkles. Yes.
I was updating some of the Firefly docs, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to go completely silly on the prompts, because if they complain, I changed the prompt for the doc and like, no big deal. And I did stuff like cats on unicorns, and they're like, oh, that's fine. I'm like, all right, as long as you're happy with it.
Yeah.
Erin, you kind of quickly mentioned notebooks.
Yeah.
I only recently found notebooks getting into Python over the last year, and in terms of DevRel and teaching, I freaking love that metaphor.
So nice.
Yeah.
So nice. That was like my first like thing where it clicked was Python notebooks. And I felt very confident in, I was a data journalism class in grad school where it was like, that was the only formal education I got. But I was like, what? This is so cool. Love this. Amazing. Super fun. Like, and it was Python. I did a little bit of R and matplotlib. So in the scikit-learn library. But it's, yeah, very fun. Hopefully you've discovered the whole like Streamlit, and Glitch was another great learning tool for me.
Yeah.
But that was like, I mean, early Glitch.
They're still pretty darn cool. I like them a lot too.
They're doing cool stuff. And I like how they have a stance on learning, which is very real.
Yeah.
Very cool.
They're still around. They got bought by
Fastly.
That's right. Yeah. You know,
we built,
I think it's a really cool tool for teaching too, like in terms of like something you use as in DevRel, like, hey, you know, we can use something like Glitch, which is to me, like some of the other code tools I think are, you know, some of them are more fun than others. Some of them are a little more like easy to kind of build like teaching tools. And Glitch was one of the ones that was really good.
I used Glitch up until the last semester. The last semester we moved over to the GitHub instance just because the university was like, you're paying for it. And so if we're paying for GitHub, please use our GitHub program. So it was the GitHub, whatever their version of Glitch, where it was in the browser code editor, blinking code spaces.
Yeah, code spaces. Yeah.
You hit period on a file and it just starts working.
Yeah,
that's the one.
GitHub code spaces from Glitch, but that's when I was teaching and I taught like introductory basic coding skills. Like how do you query an API? What is an API and it was like how to build your basic blog. And it was all in Glitch because it was just so easy to get started. Or like if someone had a problem, they could send it to me.
Code spaces thing is something I've really wanted to explore, like for projects in, you know, like for a lot of my DevRel projects, because if you just put like, there's like a config file you can put in there that will actually spin up an entire like VM, spins up everything. It doesn't, so like if you don't put anything, it'll still work, but it doesn't necessarily run the way you want it to. But if you need to put like, oh, hey, load this stuff up when you launch a VM and everything, like it's actually really cool. And I mean, you just have to like kind of put a config in your GitHub library, and then all of a sudden it's like, you know, anybody could go run it within GitHub without necessarily having to like, you know, build a separate thing out in you know, whatever the code sharing tools. I can't remember. I'm blanking on the names right now. Like
CodePen, Code Sandbox.
Yeah, those ones exactly. So, you know, it does make it a little bit easy, and it's all just kind of like, it's already out there. It's already in GitHub. It's open source, and you just can then hit that and, hey, let's run it in code spaces and spin up the entire VM and get everything going.
Yeah, there's a lot of really cool stuff out there.
Yep. Too many things. All right. So on that note, we are reaching the hour, and it's I mentioned this to Ray. We every episode we rely on Erin, our resident fermenting expert, to she does actually, like you see in the back there.
I have my back off and fermenting. I have I do actually ferment things. I do have pickled asparagus in my fridge that I made right now, which is top tier pickled vegetables. These pickled asparagus.
It's very good. I like pickled mushrooms. Do you ever do pickled mushrooms?
I actually have not done that myself at home. I've had a pickled mushroom, but I have not done it myself. I'm a big fan of the asparagus is probably my favorite. I like baby corns too, and pickled peppers. Baby corns turn out very good. Big fan.
All this sounds
great.
Like, this all sounds like a great Bloody Mary. I do make a fermented Bloody Mary. Thank you, I'll wrap. But today I'm going to quote another podcast within a podcast. This is Podcastception on the Gastropod podcast. They did a whole episode on the sound of food, which is like, we think about the way that we smell and we taste. And it's like, well, there's scientists have proven that there is actually like a correlation that we have with the sound of our food. So it started with potato chips, actually. And there was an Ig Nobel Prize in 2008 that came around Pringles potato chips, which is cool, about the crunch that happens. And he was writing about the multisensory experiences that we often have when we eat or drink. And like, if you add that in combination with sharing food with friends, it's a really nice thing. But they did talk about pickles. So we actually have, when we think of a pickle, we expect a crunch, and the crunch is loud enough in the average pickle, but they determine a high quality pickle to be heard from 10 steps away. So a good pickle should be able to be heard 10 steps away. Additionally, this was later found to, they did this experiment on like this guy. I want to know, first off, where this guy was getting research money to research the sound that foods make. And they were talking about, they made like this like organ. It's literally an organ that you would press a key and it would make a sound of a thing. And it created like a food. It made a sound of like a chip cracking or a pickle crunch. It was kind of tied back to, in the 19th century, someone tried to do that with smells. Didn't really work out. But when you paid the appropriate sound of an object, this was like a byproduct of his experimentation. So you played the sound of a pickle with something that tied in with beer. People would ranking the beer as it tasted better. So if you put it in like a pickle or a chip, where we commonly associate those with beer, the beer tasted better. But if you put in something like marshmallows or some other sounds, it doesn't say all the sounds that he used, just says that certain items that were tested to connect the connection. The scientists was to test the connection between pitch, decibels, and taste.
Really interesting.
He spent 4 years doing this.
You know, I could see like food because I read somewhere like, or saw something that like a lot of food companies, like when they'll design particularly like junk food and stuff, they actually think about like the sound, the textures, and all this stuff to like, because all those things can get you really hooked on a particular food. So they'll like mix textures and they'll like make it have a particular sound and smell, like, and this is a way they get you hooked on junk food. It's good. That was the one of the things. So I bet you it's like some junk food company trying to like do research on how can we get you hooked on really bad food.
He wrote a book. So this guy, Charles Spence, is the name of the researcher. He is the head of the cross-modal research laboratory at Oxford University, and wrote the book The Perfect Meal: A Multisensory Science of Food and Drinking, with Bettina Piqueras-Fisman. There you go. But now you know someone is testing pickles for sound next to potato chips. Now I need a beer because that both sounds good.
Yep, I would agree. It needs a good crunch. It has to have a good crunch. When they lose that crunch, they're not good. Anyway,
soggy.
So we're all about the pickles here.
It's all good.
All right. Well, this was fun. It was good to be back. I was, you know, we had last month off, Erin, but like now we're back, and we're going to be back again
in action
next month with Dana Oshiro as our guest. So Dana is an investor actually at HeavyBit, who, like, I swear to God, every developer tooling startup that I like, you kind of look and it's like, wait, HeavyBit's kind of funds them too. So like, we're going to talk about like basically DevRel in the whole developer tooling space and particularly at startups. So that should be a lot of fun. So we'll be back. You can find that at cfe.dev. You can check when that's coming up. I forget the exact date. So join us for that. Thank you, Ray. It's always good to have you on the show. For people who are watching, don't already know, you also host Code Break on cfe.dev. So you're not having an episode next week, but you will be back in what, 3 weeks?
2 weeks,
3 weeks, I guess.
Right? Yeah. So 2 weeks from today.
3 weeks from because you would be next week. So then it was 2 weeks after that. So
Next
3
week
weeks.
is July 3rd, right?
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll figure it out. Look for the next episode
What is
at
time?
some point
What
in
is
the
time?
future. I clearly don't know, says the person. Like, I'm the person who sent an email at 10:30 about a thing starting in 30 minutes that I put was at 1, which was actually at 3. So, I clearly don't understand time at all. So, all right.
What is
Well,
time?
thanks, Ray. Thanks, Erin. Good seeing you again, my former colleague. And we'll see you all next time. Bye.
Bye, friends. It's going.
Is it ending?
I'm like,
Close
It's
StreamYard.
proactive for me.
we're still recording.